Hey everyone, and welcome back to Whispering Image. Tonight's story is one of those that makes you question the quiet, forgotten corners of our world. It comes from a viewer named David, who worked a simple summer job at an old, dusty university archive. He thought he was just there to organize old papers and forgotten history. But he soon discovered that some history isn't just written down, it's alive, and it's whispering its secrets to anyone who dares to listen. So find a comfortable spot, turn down the lights, and listen closely. Because sometimes, the silence of a library isn't a sign of peace, but a sign of something waiting. When I landed the summer job at the university's Special Collections Archive, I thought it was perfect. My major was history, and the idea of spending a few months surrounded by forgotten documents, ancient maps, and the personal journals of long-dead professors felt like a dream come true. The archive was located in the oldest, most overlooked part of the campus library, a dark, temperature-controlled basement with more books and papers than any one person could ever read. My job was simple: catalog and reshelve a newly acquired collection of 19th century academic papers from a notoriously eccentric botanist. The archivist, a kind but perpetually tired woman named Mrs. Gable, gave me the key and left me to it. I was to be alone from 6 p.m. to 2 a.m., just me and the quiet. For the first week, it was exactly what I expected. A lot of dusty paper, a lot of meticulous note-taking, and a lot of quiet, peaceful solitude. The only sounds were the soft hum of the air conditioning and the occasional creak of the old wooden shelves. I felt like a detective, uncovering tiny, forgotten details about a man's life through his careful notes on plant taxonomy. It was fascinating. The first strange thing was a simple scent, a sickly sweet, floral smell, like rotting jasmine, that would appear out of nowhere. It wasn't constant. It would just waft through the air for a few seconds, then vanish. I'd look around, thinking maybe a janitor had used a new cleaning product. But I was always alone. Gable told me the scent was just old building smell, but it was too specific too. Alive. Then came the voices. At first, it was so quiet I thought I was imagining it. A low, faint whispering, like a radio playing just out of earshot. It seemed to come from the stacks, from the spaces between the shelves. I would pause my work, strain my ears, and it would stop. It was never a clear word or a phrase, just an incoherent, murmuring sound. It was like 1,000 people were having a quiet conversation on the other side of a very thick wall. It felt like the whispers were in the very air of the archive itself. One night, while I was cataloging the botanist's journals, I heard something new, a distinct, single word, whispered clearly and directly into my right ear. Undo. I froze, my heart pounding. I spun around, but there was no one there. The air was colder right where the voice had been. I rationalized it as sleep deprivation or an auditory hallucination. I was working late, after all, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was trying to communicate. The archive had a massive old card catalog, a series of wooden cabinets filled with thousands of small, handwritten index cards. I never had to use it, as all the new collections were digitally indexed. One night, as I was working late, one of the tiny drawers of the card catalog slid open with a soft, creaking sound. I looked over, and it was the drawer for P. I was spooked, but I figured it was just the humidity or the old wood shifting. I walked over and gently pushed the drawer shut. A few minutes later, it slid open again. This time, I went over, and as I was about to close it, I saw a single, blank, white index card sitting perfectly on top of the stack. It had a single word written in faint, elegant cursive: poison. My hands were shaking. I put the card back and slammed the drawer shut. I ran out of the archive and called Mrs. Gable, telling her the card catalog was malfunctioning. She just laughed. That old thing? It's been stuck for years. She told me to go home and get some sleep. I took her advice, but I knew it wasn't a malfunction. The whispers were getting louder. The messages were getting clearer. The archive wasn't just a collection of information. It was a living, breathing entity. A hive mind of forgotten knowledge and restless souls. I couldn't stay away. The curiosity was a stronger force than my fear. The next night, I came back, and the first thing I did was go to the card catalog. The P drawer was closed. I pulled it open, and the white card was gone. I looked at the index cards and found a card for poisonous plants. On the back of the card, in that same elegant script, was a name, Dr. Elias Thorne. He was the botanist whose papers I was cataloging. The archive was leading me on a scavenger hunt. I went back to the boxes of Thorne's papers. I went through his journals, his notes, everything. And I found it, a small separate journal, hidden in a false bottom of a box. It wasn't about plants. It was about people. It was a macabre, detailed account of Thorne's experiments. He wasn't just a botanist. He was a poisoner. He used obscure, rare botanical toxins to poison people who he deemed undesirable. His journal was a horrifying chronicle of his victims, their names, their slow deaths, the botanical poisons he used. The journal was a detailed record of his crimes. The whispers were the ghosts of his victims, and they were desperate for someone to find their story. I was sick to my stomach, but I was also terrified. I had just found a 100-year-old murder journal. I had to tell someone. I had to expose this. I had to let these victims rest in peace. I picked up the journal to take it to the main office. But as I did, the lights in the archive began to flicker violently. The whispers were no longer quiet murmurs. They were a cacophony of enraged, agonized voices, screaming in unison. The air grew cold, and a putrid, sweet smell filled the room. The scent of jasmine, but this time, it was overwhelming. From the darkest corners of the archive, shadows began to detach from the walls and twist into long, slender forms. They were like tendrils, like roots, slithering across the floor, reaching for me. And in the center of the room, standing at the head of a long aisle of bookshelves, was the source of the terrible jasmine smell. It was a man, thin and gaunt, with a cruel, knowing smile on his face. He looked exactly like the portrait I had seen on the first page of Thorne's journal. He was a ghost, a presence, a guardian of his terrible legacy. "You found them," he whispered, his voice a dry, papery sound, like the rustling of 1,000 old pages. "But they are mine." He held up a spectral hand, and the shelves behind him began to shudder. Books flew off the shelves, their pages flapping like angry birds, forming a solid dark wall that sealed off the only exit. Thorne was trapping me. He wasn't just haunting the archive, he was its master. The whispers of the victims, the blank cards, the misplaced tools, it was all a subtle trap. A lure to draw me in, to get me to touch his journals. He wanted to claim me. He wanted to keep his secrets safe. The shadowy tendrils began to wrap around my ankles, cold and damp. I tried to run, but they were too fast, too numerous. The screaming voices of the victims were deafening now, a terrible chorus of sound as they all cried out for release. I looked down at the journal in my hands, and I knew what I had to do. I couldn't take it with me. It was too strong. I had to destroy it. I ripped a page from the journal, and the ghostly figure of Thorne let out a terrible, silent shriek. He was losing his grip. I ripped another page, and the tendrils on my ankles lost their hold. The screams of the victims grew louder, more frantic, their hope a palpable, raw emotion. I ran. I ran down the dark aisles of the archive, tearing out pages of the journal and throwing them behind me. The ghostly screams of Thorne chasing me. I ran past the old card catalog, past the shelves of forgotten books, and I finally reached the exit. The doors were still sealed shut by the wall of books. I looked at the journal in my hands. There were only a few pages left. I knew I couldn't get out unless I destroyed the final pieces of his legacy. I ran back into the archive and stood in the middle of the room, surrounded by the shadows, the whispers, and the enraged form of Thorn. I tore the last pages from the journal, and as I did, the spectral form of Thorn began to unravel. The tendrils of shadow retreated. The books fell from the air, and the screams of the victims turned into a chorus of peaceful sighs. The sickly scent of jasmine vanished, replaced by the clean, sterile smell of old paper. The ghost of Dr. Elias Thorne was gone. He was no longer a part of the archive. The victims were free. I stood there panting, the remains of the journal in my hands. I had done it. I had freed them. I ran to the door, opened it, and walked out of the archive and into the cool night air, leaving the dusty, silent space behind me. I never went back to the library. I never told anyone what I had done. But sometimes, when I'm walking past an old, quiet building, I feel a strange sense of unease, a cold pull, and I hear a faint, distant whisper on the wind. It's the ghost of the archive, reminding me that some secrets are not meant to be found. What would you have done? Would you have stayed to try and save the victims, or would you have left the moment you heard that first whisper? Let me know your thoughts on this chilling story in the comments below. If this story gave you a good fright, please give it a thumbs up. And for more real-life terror, be sure to subscribe to Whispering Image and hit that notification bell. Until next time, be careful what you decide to dig up. Some history is better left forgotten.